Seattle. Those of you that know Alaska know that Petersburg and Seattle are not connected by a road, and it's not cheap. A couple in Anchorage said that they've been waiting on an approval from the FDA on a compassionate use exception for a medication to treat stage 4 ovarian cancer. And now they're told, just hold on, government's not operational right now. We have a lot in our maritime community, and in order for them to be lawfully out on the water, they need to have license renewed through the new merchant mariner credentialing. That's on hold. We've got a housing situation in Sitka, and we've got an Army Corps permit for the housing authority that has been delayed. We can't figure that one out. We're talking to people who have been trying to get an SBA loan, a local business owner in downtown, the school district in Sleep Mute. They've been waiting to get the impact aid emergency construction dollars so that they can repair this roof that is literally falling down on top of the kids in the back of the school there. And they're told, well, there's nobody here to take your call. There's nobody here to take your call because the government is not open. So for those who think that this is not that big of a deal, they need to start asking people, not only people who are federal employees, not only people who are SNAP recipients. They need to be asking people about just some of the day-to-day matter-of-fact things that happen when you have a small business or you're trying to get your fishing vessel out in the water. Real Alaskans are being impacted, and real Alabamians are being impacted. Americans are being impacted when we don't do our job. And maybe this idea of we don't go home this weekend until we resolve this, maybe it doesn't work. Maybe we just look at one another and say, I'm not even going to talk to you. Maybe we just continue on with multiple rounds of the same vote that we've been taking for the past 27 days and see if we get a different result. Now, some say that's the definition of insanity. I don't know. But what I do know is that when we leave and we assume that things are fine, or we send that message that things are fine because we've just gone home and it's just business as usual here, then people whose lives are really being impacted right now, they think we don't get it. We do get it. We need to act to end the shutdown. And I'm going to call on all of my colleagues to stay here until we get it done. And with that, Madam President, I yield the floor.
The senator from Texas.
Madam President, are we in a quorum call?
We are not.
Madam President, the name Hezbollah has become increasingly familiar in recent years to Americans as one of Iran's main proxy groups committed to the destruction of Israel and even the United States. Beyond the horrific bombings of the U.S. Embassy Marine barracks in Beirut, Lebanon in the 80s, many of us now associate the name with Iran, of course, which has been the principal supporter, financial supporter of Hezbollah to the tune of 70 to 90% of its budget. In return, Hezbollah acts as one of Iran's proxies in the so-called axis of resistance. We all know that Hezbollah is one of the leading terror groups in the Middle East, responsible for numerous violent attacks over the past several decades. But lesser known is their influence in the Americas, specifically in Latin America. Perhaps lesser known is the broad extent of Hezbollah's activities in the Western Hemisphere, which includes illicit drug trafficking and other criminal enterprises. Hezbollah uses these activities to generate cash to help finance terrorism back home in the Middle East. So while many in the West are focused on Iran's proxy terrorism around the world, we cannot afford to ignore our own backyard. Last week, I chaired a hearing for the Senate Caucus on International Narcotics Control to examine the role that terrorist networks have played in creating the drug crisis that we face here in the United States, which has taken hundreds of thousands of lives over recent years. In this hearing, expert witnesses testified about Hezbollah's activities in Central America and in South America, and how they've strengthened drug cartels and other criminal organizations that are actively trafficking drugs into our country across the southern border. This illicit drug trafficking in Latin America is one of Hezbollah's primary sources of income, used to finance terrorism, as I said earlier. As we learned at the hearing, now more than ever, Hezbollah will be looking to increase its cash flow and revenue from drug trafficking and other illegal activities in Latin America as they seek to rebuild from Israel's impressive campaign to rid the world of this terrorist threat. We learned that Hezbollah takes advantage of free trade zones in Central America where they can carry out their illegal operations under minimal law enforcement and oversight. And then there's the tri-border region between Argentina, Brazil, and Paraguay, long known to be a hotbed of terrorist financing, because it has a minimal law enforcement footprint and is a hub for commerce, and it is a black market for all sorts of illicit activities, from drug trafficking to arms trafficking to identity theft and even real estate schemes. Hezbollah, when it comes to its fundraising, like many criminal organizations, is commodity agnostic, meaning they'll do anything for money. The border of these three countries, known as the tri-border region, is isolated and hard to monitor, making it possible for easy transit between them. It boasts a robust network of roads that connect the area to major cities as well as international airports. These attributes, paired with high levels of corruption and lack of good governance, create the perfect petri dish for both illicit and licit trade to flourish. It was in this region in 2008 where the U.S. Operation Titan arrested upwards of 130 suspects and seized roughly $23 million associated with the joint operation between Hezbollah and Colombian cartels that were engaged in cocaine smuggling and money laundering. This operation uncovered about 700,000 wiretapped conversations revealing drug cartels' association with, working hand in glove with Hezbollah. 700,000 wiretapped conversations tying these drug cartels to this terrorist organization. For example, one key cartel leader was known as Taliban and given permission to freely import drugs and launder cash into Lebanon in exchange for a 12% tax on his proceeds paid to Hezbollah. Hezbollah's operations extend to other free trade zones like the Margarita Islands in Venezuela and Macau in Colombia. It was in Macau where Ali Mohammed Saleh, a designated Hezbollah facilitator, led a support cell that raised money for the broader Hezbollah network. His activities included transporting money from Colombia to Hezbollah in Lebanon through Venezuela. The Venezuelan government has openly embraced this illicit commerce and these criminal organizations. At last week's hearing, one of our witnesses described the regime of President Maduro as, quote, a key enabler of Hezbollah's malign activity in the Western Hemisphere. From providing passports to Hezbollah operatives, allowing them to travel more freely, to creating transportation pipelines to intelligence collaboration, Venezuela has developed a partnership with Iran and Hezbollah, allowing them to finance their terror operations around the world while they engage in illicit money laundering and transportation of drugs and other illegal activities in the Americas. The U.S. Treasury Department has uncovered key evidence that the Maduro regime and Iran are collaborating at the state level. For example, in 2020, Adel El Zabayar, a former Venezuelan official and political ally of Nicolas Maduro, was indicted in the Southern District of New York for facilitating cocaine and weapons trafficking between his own government and Hezbollah. A Venezuelan businessman was also found to have provided resources to Hezbollah, including ideological and military training and networks for illicit trafficking for drugs and weapons. Notwithstanding the impressive work of the UN's intelligence community, Maduro has not exactly been secretive about who his friends and who his enemies are. In 2022, Maduro openly bragged about his exemplary relationship and increasing cooperation with Iran. In an interview, he said, "All of us who fight against colonialism, all of us who fight to decolonize our minds and our people are part of the axis of resistance that stands against the methods of the imperialists for imposing hegemony on the world." Now, if you didn't know that this was the president of Venezuela speaking, you might have mistaken the quote from a leader of Iran or some other state sponsor of terrorism. Or you might have mistaken it for one of America's elite universities or a slogan from one of the pro-Hamas clubs protesting on Columbia's campus, for example, last spring, who pride themselves in resisting Western colonialism. Well, obviously, they're all drinking the same Kool-Aid. In addition to aiding and abetting Hezbollah, Maduro has been criminally indicted based on his leadership of the Cartel of the Suns, probably one of the least known cartels. Better known are the Mexican cartels. But Cartel of the Suns is actually headed up by Nicolas Maduro, the president of Venezuela. And it includes a network of Venezuelan military officials, including the Army, Navy, Air Force, and the Bolivarian National Guard. Named for the insignias in the Venezuelan military officials' uniforms, the Cartel of the Suns, or the Cartel de los Soles, is involved in everything from gasoline smuggling to illegal mining, drug trafficking, and a whole raft of other illegal activities in Central and South and North America. The U.S. Treasury Department sanctioned the Cartel of the Suns this past July for its material support of Tren de Aragua and the Sinaloa cartel and their illegal drug and criminal activity here in the United States. This gives you an idea of how interconnected these networks are that seek to undermine our country and to threaten our people. But not just in America, but also our friends and allies in Central and South America. This is a network that chants threat to Israel, death to Israel, and also chants death to America. We've known for a long time that much of the fentanyl trafficked through our southern border was manufactured using Chinese precursor chemicals. We also know that China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea have been working in concert for a long time to undermine the West. So it's no surprise that Maduro's despotic regime in Venezuela aspires to join that list as part of the axis of resistance. We should not be shocked when our enemies work together. The crisis of drug trafficking, human trafficking, and other crime in the hands of international criminal networks that the Biden administration ignored at the southern border is another scheme that our enemies have devised to harm the United States. The Biden administration was asleep at the switch, and that's being kind, when it came to the threat of a porous southern border and their open border policies, allowing criminal networks, along with their poison, to be freely transported into the United States and take tens of thousands of lives, and help enrich our adversaries in Iran and Hezbollah. The deaths in America resulting from drug overdose and the violent crime that our people are suffering is not an accident. It's directly connected to this axis of resistance. And while it may be easy to think we can ignore these terrorists in the Middle East because, well, there's an ocean between us and them, the fact of the matter is there is not. They are operating right here in our own backyard. Iran's proxy terrorist operations have contributed to and profited from the instability and corruption in South America that has led to a mass migration crisis in South America and Mexico, which has flooded our southern border with unprecedented numbers of illegal crossings during the Biden administration. This phenomenon, paired with the strengthening of the criminal and drug cartel networks in Latin America, has led to much more criminal activity here in the United States, where street gangs distribute the drugs exported from these countries to America, to our border, then to be distributed across the United States to the detriment of the American people. So the reason this hearing was so important is because we need to connect the dots. We need to make sure we understand the nature of the threat to our way of life. And it's not just about over there, it is about right here in our backyard, that our enemies are collaborating and threatening the safety and security of the American people. Madam President, I yield the floor. I note the absence of quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Alston-Brooks.
The senator from Iowa.
Calling the quorum be suspended.
Without objection.
Madam President, I come to the Senate today to address my recent oversight relating to our nation's federal courts and to share some of my recent findings. This month, I sent letters to a pair of federal judges regarding their suspected use of artificial intelligence in published court orders. The two judges issued orders that were wrought with serious, inexplicable errors that were of great concern to the litigants, to the public, and to me. One judge, sitting in the Southern District of Mississippi, issued an order that named plaintiffs and defendants who were not even a parties to the case. It misquoted statutory text. It erroneously cited evidence that didn't exist in the record, and it referred to sworn declarations by people who had not appeared anywhere in the case. I've never seen or heard of anything like this from any federal court. The other judge, sitting in the District of New Jersey, issued an order with fake quotes and misstatements about case law. The order even falsely attributed quotations to the defendants that apparently were never made. Errors like I just described are unfathomable. Both judges' errors are obviously reckless and unacceptable, but in fact, it gets worse. When these flagrant mistakes were brought to the court's attention by counsel in the cases, both judges attempted to minimize their faults. One even referred to the errors as quote unquote clerical. Both judges removed their orders from the docket and the public record without even any explanation. This lack of transparency is breathtaking, and the judge's refusal to accept responsibility for the actions eroded public confidence in the competency and fairness of the federal judiciary. When litigants or their attorneys misuse artificial intelligence like this and file sloppy briefs with incorrect citations and falsehoods, they are rightly held accountable. Just recently, we've seen attorneys sanctioned, attorneys fined, removed from their cases, and even referred for professional discipline and disbarment for this kind of conduct. Well, that's how attorneys are handled when they misuse or do the wrong thing. In fact, in a case assigned to one of these judges, a magistrate judge publicly chastised a counsel for using artificial intelligence in a brief. Now, apparently, some judges think accountability runs only one way, but we all know they are wrong. As the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals recently explained, quote, the use of AI or other technology does not excuse carelessness or failure to follow professional standards, end of quote. That's true for every officer of a federal court, attorney, and judge alike. Now, to their credit, finally, These two judges responded to my letters and explained that they're taking measures to ensure that these instances never happen again. Each acknowledged that the errors in their orders arose from the misuse of artificial intelligence by staff in their chambers. One judge blamed a law student intern, and the other blamed a law clerk for generating the errors. This helps explain how it happened, but ultimately how it happened that way does not matter. A lawyer can't excuse an error-ridden brief by blaming a paralegal or junior associate. Attorneys' names go on their filings just as judges' names go on their orders. The judges issue orders in their own name that determine the rights of the parties before them. The buck stops at the judges. It's bad enough that the federal court order could misstate or pervert the law to the degree that we saw in these two judges, but I'm concerned that these now public blunders arose in cases represented by sophisticated parties who had the resources and the legal talent to push back and make sure that their clients got justice. So at the same time, through these errors that I've pointed out, we have to fear that people without resources, that if the same thing happened to an indigent party or a pro se litigant, the truth may never have come to light. I cannot and will not stand for that. All litigants are owed a fair shake in the court. Our federal courts must hold themselves to the highest of standards. Our Constitution depends on it. Justice requires it. Americans deserve better from their judges. Now, to be clear, I appreciate these two judges finally accepting responsibility for what went on in their jurisdiction. And I believe them when they say that they're deploying measures to prevent the same mistakes from happening again. But this should be a lesson, not just for these two judges, but for the entire bench and the bar. Artificial intelligence is a powerful and potentially dangerous resource. Although it may have some role in preliminary legal research, it cannot and must not be a substitute for legal judgment. The Senate confirms federal judges. We don't confirm computer software to perform the duties mandated under Article 3. As chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, I'm committed to safeguarding litigants' rights and ensuring that every party in federal court receives fair treatment and careful review by Article 3 judges. I call on every judge in America to make this issue seriously, or to take this issue seriously, and formalize measures to prevent the misuse of artificial intelligence in their chambers. I also call upon the Administrative Office of the U.S. Courts and also the Judicial Conference to quickly develop decisive and meaningful guidance on the use of artificial intelligence by our judiciary. In the wake of my oversight, Judge Cronin in the Southern District of New York implemented a rule in his courtroom to ensure the accuracy of filings. He requires attorneys to disclose any artificial intelligence use and to certify that he or she, quote, personally reviewed the filings for accuracy, end of quote. I applaud him for taking this issue seriously, and I encourage other members of the bench to consider similar rules and to hold themselves to the same standard as they require of litigants in the court. I'm hopeful that these two unfortunate episodes by the two judges that I referred to will serve as a wake-up call across the federal judiciary. But if it isn't, I'm here today to give a warning. I'm watching. All of Congress is now watching. If this issue doesn't get fixed by the judiciary, we'll step in to protect the rights of the American litigants using powers available to Congress under the Constitution. I yield the floor and suggest the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Alsobrooks.
into the beginning of winter already. We keep in close touch with our food banks. But what I'm hearing is that we are already seeing the lines at the food bank growing longer. And what is hard to see is to know how many military families are part of those lines now. Madam President, this is simply not right. Now, we may or may not have what we call rifle shot votes this week that will, maybe we will take up again the bill that would pay all the federal workers. Maybe
Madam President,
The senator from Kentucky.
ask unanimous consent to vitiate the quorum call.
Without objection.
Ask unanimous consent to
Previously scheduled vote occur immediately.
that the previously scheduled vote occur immediately.
Without objection. Under the previous order, the Senate will proceed to executive session and resume consideration of the following nomination, which the clerk will report.
Nomination, the judiciary, Rebecca L. Tableson of Wisconsin, to be United States Circuit Judge for the Seventh Circuit.
The question is on the nomination.
Madam President,
The senator from Kentucky.
ask unanimous consent that we have the yeas and nays recorded. No? Just ask.
No, you see, just ask for the yeas.
Ask for the yeas and nays.
Is there a sufficient second? There appears to be. The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Alsobrooks, Ms. Baldwin, Mr. Banks, Mr. Barrasso, Mr. Bennett, Mrs. Blackburn, Mr. Blumenthal, Ms. Blunt Rochester, Mr. Booker, Mr. Bozeman, Mrs. Britt.
Aye.
Mr. Budd. Ms. Cantwell. Mrs. Capito, Mr. Cassidy. Ms. Collins, Mr. Coons, Mr. Cornyn, Ms. Cortez Masto, Mr. Cotton, Mr. Kramer, Mr. Crapo, Mr. Cruz, Mr. Curtis, Mr. Daines, Ms. Duckworth. Mr. Durbin, Ms. Ernst, Mr. Fetterman, Mrs. Fisher, Mr. Gallego. Mrs. Gillibrand, Mr. Graham, Mr. Grassley, Mr. Haggerty, Ms. Hassan, Mr. Hawley, Mr. Heinrich, Mr. Hickenlooper, Mr. Rono, Mr. Hoven, Mr. Husted, Mrs. Hyde-Smith. Mr. Johnson, Mr. Justice, Mr. Kane, Mr. Kelly, Mr. Kennedy, Mr. Kim, Mr. King, Ms. Klobuchar, Mr. King, Mr. Kelly, Mr. Kennedy, Mr. Kim, Mr. King, Ms. Klobuchar, Mr. Langford, Mr. Lee, Mr. Lujan, Ms. Lummis, Mr. Markey, Mr. Marshall, Mr. McConnell, Mr. McCormick, Mr. Merkley, Mrs. Moody, Mr. Moran, Mr. Moreno, Mr. Mullen, Ms. Murkowski, Mr. Murphy, Mrs. Murray, Mr. Ossoff, Mr. Padilla, Mr. Paul, Mr. Peters, Mr. Reed, Mr. Ricketts, Mr. Risch, Ms. Rosen, Mr. Rounds, Mr. Sanders, Mr. Schatz, Mr. Shipp, Mr. Schmidt, Mr. Schumer, Mr. Scott of Florida, Mr. Scott of South Carolina, Mrs. Shaheen, Mr. Sheehy, Ms. Slotkin, Ms. Smith, Mr. Sullivan, Mr. Thune, Mr. Tillis, Mr. Tuberville, Mr. Van Hollen, Mr. Warner, Mr. Warnock, Ms. Warren, Mr. Welch, Mr. Whitehouse, Mr. Wicker, Mr. Wyden,